And I sat with the hypnotherapist who I started working with 10 years ago. And she said, Ben, I'm going to reconnect you back to your emotions. We're going to go introspectively for you to learn who you really are. I would have been like, no, I just, I'm just here to learn about the sex stuff. Like that's what someone
Get me
else.
a better sex life, okay? Hi everyone, welcome back to Love, Sex and Magic with me, your host, Melissa Wells. I'm so excited for today's guest. Ben Bidwell is a mindset and purpose coach for men, writer and public speaker who's stripping back the conversation to change the stigma around mental health and masculinity. He once lived an uninspired life driven by other people's expectations at the cost of his own authenticity. But what he now knows is that external validation doesn't bring an internal sense of fulfillment. So in this conversation, we talk all about masculine and feminine energy. We talk about toxic masculinity, wounded masculine behaviors and traits, and how that affects our relationships. We talk about sexuality, intimacy, feeling our feelings, and what we can do to help the men in our lives to just be more authentic and true to themselves. So this is a really beautiful and vulnerable conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. So Ben, welcome to Love, Sex and Magic. It's so good to have you here.
Do you know what, Mel? It's like the build-up has been so intense. It's like a joy just now to be sat in the space with you. Like, this is just amazing. So thank you.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. So we met a few years ago through a Hay House event that we were both speaking at. And I was just blown away by your presence and authenticity on stage, and just what you gave of yourself was just so beautiful and so rare. And I was just like, wow, like this guy is really doing something special. And so then I invited you to come and speak at my event, the Self-Love Summit in London, which you did, and it just floored everyone, to be honest. You know, the way that you share from the perspective of the masculine in such a vulnerable way is, just really something to behold. So I just want to say I really appreciate the work that you're doing in the world.
Well, honestly, it's so beautiful to hear that. Honestly, it really touches me because that's what I want to do. I want to show up and be myself, and I feel, right now the message is there to be heard. Right now, this is really topical around masculinity and men, and I just I haven't always been this way, but it's a joy for me just to show up with a freedom and a presence, and just to say, hey, this is me, and this is what I'm about, and this is my passion, and I hope it can make a difference.
Yeah, well, it definitely is. So yeah, I'd love if you could share a little bit more about your, like, what this journey was like for you. Like you said, I wasn't always this way. What were you like before you started doing this work and making this shift to like really come into your divine masculine and really share your heart from that male perspective? Like, paint us a picture of how old, like past life Ben was.
First thing that comes to mind is just lost. I was lost. I didn't know myself. And I became the man that I thought I should be, who's so different to my truth. I grew up in a society, I always say this, in the 80s, I saw Rambo, I saw Terminator. For me, if I was going to be a successful man, I needed to be strong, tough, brave, unemotional. It was all that stuff. That was what society showed me. That's what I saw. And inside of my heart was a lot of softness, a lot of sensitivity, a lot of tenderness. My mum is a nurse, and she always showed me that, and I loved that in her. It was beautiful, these beautiful gifts, these human gifts, but I wasn't allowed to express them. If I expressed them, then I risked being bullied rather than, leading and being successfully, or a man who sort of perceived to be successful. And so right from the word go, from as young as I can remember, I buried my truth. I buried the beautiful feminine energy that I had inside of me, and I went all in on the masculine, and it became a game of validation. And validation for me was came in the form of women, parties, being tough, being brave, ticking all society's boxes, going all in on success, and really not only that, but burying the beautiful sides of me, the softness, the sensitive, the connection to love. I could never love. I completely buried that. I couldn't tell my mum for 30 years that I loved her, even though I deeply loved her. I always did. But I wouldn't let myself. I wouldn't let myself tell someone I loved them in relationships. It just was not who I built up, this perception of who I should be. So lost is really, it's the only way I can describe it. If I was to sum it all up, I just was so lost. I don't blame myself. This is the path, and this is why I'm so passionate as to what I do, because I know inside of my heart that there was this beautiful energy, and I've seen it now in so many men in the work that I do with men. I see it, these tough guys, and you provide space for them, and I see their tenderness when they're allowed. And
yes.
I want men to be able to be allowed that space. I know how much it hurt me and how lost I was, and I don't want men to be lost. I come back to the space, hurt people, and there's a lot of hurt men out there causing damage.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful point. And I think you're right. It's such a collective thing. Unfortunately, it's not just you that experiences this. It seems to be like just a huge societal issue that we're raising men to be closed off from their emotions, unable to express their heart, unable to reveal their deeper truth, be in close intimacy. And like you said, there's such a valid point, like Terminator action men. Like women always talk about, like, we have like the Barbie dolls that we grew up with, and this kind of idea of femininity. But you guys had the same with these male action heroes, and gotta just be strong and carry on. And like, I can't count the amount of times that I've heard someone say to a little boy to man up and be brave, instead of just really allowing him to cry. Like, how much have it breaks my heart to think how many little boys there are around the world that don't feel like they're allowed to cry, like that, what that's creating in the adult men. It's heartbreaking, really. And I think the reverse of that for women would probably be women are not allowed to be angry or feel rage or be any kind of show any kind of that aggression. That's more considered the masculine, and the feminine is the one that cries. So it's really like a collective issue of, we're telling people this is how you should be, instead of just letting them be everything, all the colors of the rainbow, right?
And that's all it is for me. It's like this categorizing of people, telling them that they've got to be a certain thing is really damaging, from the word go. Because I remember reading recently that the perception is, I think that the truth is that women are stronger than society gives them credit for, and men are more sensitive than society gives them credit for. And we're boxed into those categories from the word go. And speaking from a man's perspective, it hurts. It causes pain. We don't know it because it's all we've ever known. From as early as I remember, that was my way. So I didn't know that the pain that was caused until I started to do the work, and still I started to release it and become authentically more myself. And it's like, wow, like that behavior, that was not my truth. And when you're not aligned to your truth, you're disconnected. It's an inauthentic way to be, and you're always trying, you're striving, you're chasing. You're validating, it's heavy. You're wearing a mask, and it's not. There's no freedom. There's no sense of freedom, and it hurts everyone. From a male perspective, you look at the stats around the destruction that men cause through all sorts of different ways, but you also look at the male suicide rates, and we're in pain. There's no two ways about it. So, yeah, fundamentally, for me, it's just allowing. It's this allowing men to be all of who they are, allowing women to be all of who they are, not categorizing, saying this is who you should be. And I think that's the thing. Like, how many people are being who they should be, not who they truly are.
Yeah, and I think you raised an interesting point earlier when you said that, your journey to this was allowing yourself to connect with your inner feminine. And I think that is something that a lot of men struggle with, because I don't know. It's like they don't want to be seen as feminine, or there's like a bad word for them to to have in there. Do you know what I mean? But I think that's really important, because I do believe that, like, through healing the masculine, we heal the feminine, and through healing the feminine, we heal the masculine. It's the yin and the yang. It's all connected. Can you share, like, how, like, did you feel triggered around using the word feminine or going into your feminine body? Like, how did you start to navigate that, and what are some of the things that you started to do to shift it?
Yeah, like there was no part of me. Well, no, that's not true. My rational mind used to hear about the feminine energy and just think, why the hell, I'm a man? I don't want any feminine energy. What like, how does that serve me? And of course I had no understanding or no perspective, and no one taught me, so I don't carry any blame. Of course there was the opportunity for me to learn, but it was just not. When you're stuck in that masculine trait, you don't want to learn, you don't want to grow, you don't want to, you're not open-minded enough to experience what the feminine energy is about and how it can serve you. You just think you've got to go all in. I need to be tough. I need to be this stuff. That's who I am. So yeah, it wasn't so much I was triggered, but I just was so disconnected, so uninterested in this perception of embracing any form of feminine energy inside of me. And, in all honesty, like, I never went on a journey to connect with my feminine. I never knew that there was work for me to do there. I didn't want to do that work. The only reason I did any work was because I wanted more fulfillment in my sex life, and if when I work with a hypnotherapist, and this is why I have to have sympathy, and I can't carry any blame for any man who is showing up still stuck in that space, because, I was there. And when I sat with the hypnotherapist who I started working with 10 years ago, and she said, Ben, I'm going to reconnect you back to your emotions. We're going to go introspectively for you to learn who you really are. I would have been like, no, I'm just here to learn about the sex stuff. Like, that's
Get me a better sex life, okay? Listen, lady, I'm here because I want to have good sex. That is it. I'm not talking about emotions. The two are not connected.
No, we joke, but like, that was like 100% it. That was, and I like, I'm lucky because I was persistent enough. I sat with her, but all the time after every session, I was like, okay, that was great. And I just told my mum I loved her, and I sent her some flowers, and there's part of me that feels good about that. But like, when are we getting to the sex stuff? Like, like.
I love it. It's so interesting because, like, obviously, as you know, like, I've worked with a lot of clients, female clients, around sexuality, and we have there's a similar journey. Like, people come looking for the sex stuff, and we dive into feelings and emotions and relationships and mother-father stuff and masculine, feminine stuff. And it does lead to the sex stuff eventually, but you have to really, it's deep stuff. And I think people don't realize that to have a really beautiful relationship and connection with your sexuality really requires you to have a beautiful relationship with your heart.
Totally. And I'm conscious that with my marketing, because I think I've probably got that wrong, in that I've gone on the journey, I've reconnected with my heart, and I want other men to reconnect with their heart. But if you ask the average man, and if you asked me 10 years ago, do I want to connect with my heart? Absolutely not. As I say, I just want to be better at sex and to have more fulfillment in that area. So, like, I understand that there are some coaches who, from a guy's perspective, they'll market themselves and they'll just say, hey, do you want to be better at sex? And men are like, yes, I do. But little do they know is they're going to be taken on a journey to reconnect with their feminine energy, which of course they'd say, no, I don't want to do that work at the very beginning. But that's the thing. It's all marketing, and men are so stuck in their heads, and that we'll put two and two together and decide that's not for us. I'm not going there. I don't want to be on that journey, but sex is a great hook into this work in that respect.
Yeah, because sexual attraction is about the polarity between the masculine and the feminine energies. It's like, of course, we're going to need to understand both of these energies within us to be able to have the deepest sexual connection. And, if you are a man and you are a masculine man who is looking to be partnered with a feminine woman, let's just say, then you're going to need to be, for you to be truly attuned to her, to read her, to feel her, that's when you're going to be able to be the best lover, right? By really being able to feel her energy, her essence, and be able to give to that. And if you're not able to feel that within yourself, then it's just going to be, for want of a better word, banging with no real, with no real feeling.
And that was my life, Mel. That was my life. It was awful.
Just banging all the time. That was my life. Yeah.
Honestly though, and it's and this is the thing. Society ticks those. You're ticking boxes. You're getting pats on the back. You're getting fist bumps, high fives.
Yeah.
Telling stories.
That's so true.
Great. It's rewarded.
Yes.
It's rewarded, and
that's so true.
Internally, it's just not fulfilling.
No, and we hate that as well. We hate feeling like, that's awful for us, feeling like we're just like a notch on the bedpost and that there's going to be stories told and there's no real sensitivity to what a sacred experience it is.
I remember having sex with a girl. This must be at the beginning of my journey. And maybe I was just welcoming in people a little bit more conscious, and I welcomed in this girl, and we had a beautiful connection, and we had sex. And after it, she said to me, "Ben, I feel like you've just had sex with me, like I'm just any other girl, like every other girl you've ever had sex with. There's nothing there. Don't worry, I don't carry any shame on this. You're looking at me honestly. I'm like, it makes sense.
That breaks my heart.
That breaks my heart for her. Like from my perspective, it's like, I don't carry any shame around that, Mel, because honestly, I was just doing my thing. I was just following the path that I was shown. And, I hold gratitude that I'm not in that space now. And I hold gratitude that I'm more conscious, and there's still work for me to be done. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I've got this nailed, but, and I never will. It's always going to be ongoing. But now, absolutely, I'm really not that bothered. There's only so much I'm going to get out of banging, if we're going to call it that, that experience. It's like, well, I might as well do that myself, what I'm after. And I think this is something that I'm really coming conscious to now. As a very sensitive guy, really, it's not like I'm just sensitive. It's like I'm very sensitive. I cherish that. And I really need a real depth to really see someone and feel them fully, really go there, let someone in properly. It's not just papering around the cracks and kind of having a deep conversation and saying, I'm so grateful for you. It's like, really, I need you to feel my fears, my vulnerabilities. I want to be fully in this space with you where we are a team without any hiding. And maybe this is because I've carried the pain from before, where I was having such disconnected sex and it did so little for me. Maybe now I'm just so driven that I just can't go back into that space anymore. It just doesn't serve me. But I really believe that, this is a real problem for men in terms of my own experience, my 20s. I had some beautiful girlfriends who were amazing, had beautiful hearts, and they deserved everything. And I kept them at such a distance and never allowed them in. And from my own perspective, it kept me safe, but it also led me to constantly crave other experiences because there wasn't depth. It was surface level. And I craved that unhealthy masculine, that wounded masculine was seeking lust and new experiences and running away. And that was painful for me. It was almost torture being in a relationship and not being able to experience the full depths of it and seeking other things, but not wanting to hurt them.
It's really interesting that you share that, because are you saying that you had to find that within yourself? It wasn't like a problem with the partner not being able to go there with you. It was you not being able to go there with yourself. So kind of jumping from woman to woman, looking for something.
Yeah, I think that's so common in so many men, so many men, and even men who are in relationships, unfortunately, but they're looking around, they're not fully present and fully on board with the relationship they're in. And they're not able to consciously go deep and really allow a real meaningful connection. But
it's like a fear. It's a fear of real intimacy, isn't it? Really, really being seen, because that was really scary to do at some point. So there's going to be many, many women listening, I imagine, who are in relationships with men who experience what you have shared in terms of having these walls up, not really allowing themselves to be vulnerable. What advice do you have? I'm sure you get this question a million times, but for the women who are in these relationships and they really want their partner to open up, to let the walls down, to let themselves be seen, to let themselves truly drop into that heart space, what can women do without saying, I want you to be like this, you're not good enough, like without pushing them or feeling like they're pressuring them, what tools do you have?
Yeah, I mean, none of that stuff is going to work, is it? But of course, it's natural. We're like, come on, like, just, I wish you would just feel something. Why can't you? That's, and it's natural. I get it, but it's never going to. Firstly, we know that the work has to be done by the individual. So the man has to want to do the work, and they're not going to be pushed. And then the way that they're set up, probably in getting to that space, it's just normal for them, and they're so conditioned, and they believe that's who they are. I believed that I was unemotional. I believed I was dead inside because I'd wrapped myself in that blanket for so long, and society had rewarded me that was my identity. So if someone said to me, Ben, just loosen up, it's like, well, that's not me. So we can't just tell them. So they have to want to do the work. But if to allow them to want to do the work, can we really embody it ourselves? Can we provide the safety for them now to go there, to really sit in that space, and to allow them to really express all of their truths? And it's almost like a flip reversal. It's almost like can the women really hold space for their man to feel safe enough to expose the deepest parts of them, to expose like the parts that they carry shame around, the fact that perhaps they've done things in the past that they're not proud of, that they don't like. Can you let them be all of the man that they are and still accept them and not hold it against them, not judge them, but just acknowledge that this is part of their healing and sinking deeper into their heart in that space, because now they can show up in a space where they truly can be themselves. So it requires a strength from the feminine to sit and hold them and allow them to nurture them and allow them to say, hey, I see you, you're my warrior, you're my man, and I want to hold you, and I want you to be all of who you can be with us, and I just want to sink a little deeper into that space. What's possible? What's inside of you? Like, tell me more about you. Can we go there? Please just allow me that honor to see more of you, so that we can become more of a team. We can go deeper into our relationship, and we can get more out of this. If you can kind of sit in that space and just allow, and they can feel safe enough to express more of who they really are in a world that doesn't allow them to.
Yeah, I love that. It's so beautiful. And I think what's coming up for me is that women like genuinely need to love this side of their man when he does show it. They need to be like, wow, like I appreciate this so much. I admire this so much. I accept this so much. This is so beautiful. Instead of, I think, what unconsciously we've been conditioned to do when a man or a boy cries is like, we don't know what the fuck to do with that, so it's like we need to be able to receive that and hold that and not reject it, or be afraid of or confused of it. And I think that's really beautiful work for women to do inside of relationships.
Yeah, we have to bear in mind at some point that guy has shown some kind of softness or tenderness or weakness in some capacity, and people have held it against him. And he's decided that he won't let that be seen. Maybe that was him being bullied. Maybe that was source of rejection in some capacity from his parents, or, in some area of life, rejected by a girl, perhaps in an early relationship, or friends who started to pick on him because, he cried or he was emotional in some capacity. And a story would have formed to say, hey, don't ever go into that space ever again. And I put my hands up here. I went through that experiences many times, and it's armor. And the only way that we let go of that armor is to be able to feel that our partner will still accept us and will welcome that side of us, and to hold us with tenderness, that it's okay without judgment.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears a little and talk about this conversation around toxic masculinity. And, there's been a huge thing recently in the UK, women sharing about how they're not feeling safe still when they're going out at night or walking home and all of this stuff. And there's there's the statement, not all men. And all of this stuff has been really, really topical recently. And I'm just curious to hear like what your perspective on this is, because I've also heard quite a few men share from their perspective that this is really hard for them to hear, and they feel that women hate them and they're really doing their best. And there's obviously, everyone's got their own perspective, but I'm just curious to hear like your thoughts on this movement from a male perspective, because I think the goal of this is to help women feel more safe ultimately, and to help men do the work. But I'm also very aware that by shaming men into doing the work is not going to help them to do the work either. So there's got to be a degree of understanding and compassion. But then it's really hard to have compassion and understanding for some of these behaviors and actions, and which is toxic and not acceptable. Like, where do you stand on all of this? Like, what's your opinion?
Everything you just said. I mean, I will start and say, like, in terms of toxic masculinity, I much prefer the term toxic conditioning, because every man is born pure, and then they learn otherwise, and they become disconnected from their heart, and it leads them, down a path of destruction. And then you're so right. The only way that men are gonna want to heal, particularly the ones who really need to heal, which is a lot, is through compassion. If they're shamed, and listen, I speak from my own experience here. When this started to kick off, immediately and I've done some work around this, and I felt triggered, and I saw women calling men out, and I actually made a video, and I'm so glad I didn't sit in the space, because we'll get to it. But I made a video saying, hey, it's not going to help anyone if we're calling men out. We need to soften. We need to have compassion. But like you then also said, that is not having compassion for the pain that women are experiencing, and how can they have compassion for some of the behavior that they've been through. So I was lacking compassion for them. And there's so much to this. But ultimately, absolutely, I think men have to start by having compassion. Women have been through a huge amount, and they are coming from some deep wounds that were flared up during the last month or two, that mean that, sure, they're not in a place yet to say men have good hearts, or they forgive men, or whatever it is. And at the moment, they just want their message to be heard, and that is that men have caused pain and destruction, and that's where they're coming from. So men have to sit in that space and listen, and just hear that, and not take this. It's not a personal attack. This is just women sharing their experiences, and that's a big lesson for men in general, is to allow women to express their emotions and express their truth. So can we do that at the very starting place, and then not get defensive enough to go, hey, like, you're saying all men. Well, I'm not that man. So like what you're saying, immediately discounting everything you're saying because I'm not that man, because you're shaming me. But sinking in and just listening now, and understanding that society takes us on an unhealthy path. And whilst we may have stayed on the right side of the line somehow, along the way, maybe we've ducked on the wrong side at times, but, not meaning to, because we know that there is good in our heart. We know that, and we wouldn't deliberately try and cause pain. Can we understand that across society there's a problem here? And fundamentally, men really need, and we're being asked to right now, to reconnect with our hearts. And that's not stripping the warriors in us. That's not telling us that we need to every time have deep and emotional conversations about our feelings whenever we meet up. But it's just meaning that, can we have the capacity to express all of who we are, and to soften into the softness inside of us, as well as still being the warrior in a healthy way, and channeling our anger and expressing our anger in ways that don't hurt other people, but allow us to release it. And this is the work. And there's no shame on men for me, as I say, because I've sat in rooms with so many men who have caused pain and destruction, and I've seen their truth and their heart, and I know they didn't mean to it's really hard to do this. So I've sat in room with men who, drug dealers, with professional sportsmen, with ex-policemen, special forces, men who have had to be strong and tough all the way through their lives and have caused pain. And when they've been allowed the safety to drop into their heart, and they've been able to do so over time, it's not a click your fingers thing, but over 5 days, let's say, then their heart has always been pure. It's just they didn't know how to connect with it at times, and they went into this mode of safety, of needing validation, of thinking they've got to stay safe, they've got to help hurt other people and show their own strength. And it's never been their truth. It's just been the path they've shown.
Yeah, I do as well. And I think at the end of the day, we all want connection and love and truth and intimacy and relationship, like healthy relationship. But like you said, it is the toxic conditioning. And I think from the women's point of view, there's not a single woman that I think on the world hasn't had some kind of, pain caused to them from this wounded masculine, this conditioning that men face. But I think our job now really is to not create an image of men that is not what we really want to see. I think it's our responsibility now, if we can, hold love and compassion in our hearts and really see men in the way that we want to see them, and not let our past hurts, betrayals, scars, and bruises color the way that we see every man that we come into contact with, because then we're just creating and attracting more of what we don't want, So it's like being able to speak our truth and say, this was unacceptable, this was painful, this was not on, this happened, and being able to stand in that truth and also not let it, ruin the way that we see men in the world, because I think that's going to stop us again from having the kind of relationships that we want. And I think the relationships that we want, there's going to be healing on both sides to be able to have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful, Mal. Really beautiful. Like, the way I'd sum it up is to say, men have done bad things, but they're not bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many men that have been hurt by women as well in different ways. There's a conversation for that as well. And I think a lot of, as you said, hurt people, and a lot of men are acting from a place of hurt because they have been hurt by the feminine. It just shows up in a very different way. But I think all women have also hurt men. It's just in a different way. It doesn't show up as, it's a little less easy to spot because it's not as physically big. And do you know what I'm trying to say here?
Of course. Yeah, it's not as visible. It's not as, like, it's not in figures and on the news. But it's emotionally. You can't measure emotions, can you, in that sense? And I guess, like, one thing I'd love to add on to that as well is that, a major scar that any woman could leave a man with is to say he's too emotional or too weak or not manly enough, because, he's going to go in on some toxic traits from that place, because that's men are so afraid of weakness. And if we're put in a place where we think, this is not meant to be poor men, by the way, because we cause enough destruction, but just to be conscious that when we make men bad or wrong in that, or appear weak in that space, we are pushing them towards avoiding that and going all in on, okay, I'll show women that I'm never going to be rejected on being weak again. I'm never going to show my emotions like that ever again. I'm not letting them in. I'm going to be armored up all the way. If that's the way, I'm going to get rejected. And I think there's probably not many, like a lot of men who have been through that at some point, maybe in some capacity, where they've wanted a girl and the girl said, no, you're not manly enough for me, or you're too weak. And then they've carried that scar, and forevermore they will never want to be perceived as weak or unmanly again. And they'll go overboard and be disconnected in the future.
So what is a message that you would like to share for the men listening, and then also for the women listening?
The men, the first thing, I'd start from this place. I'd always say it, like, for me, as a man who wants to help other men, I have to, and I mean it. that I don't carry any blame for any man in whatever space they're in. It's not about, I always come back to this, your wound is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And that's where men need to soften in. Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's everything. Your wound is not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And, men are doing everything to deny their wounds at the moment. Well, not at the moment, always. We don't want, wounds are weak. We don't want to have wounds. But if we can let men understand that there is no blame on them for the wounds they do have, which everyone has, men and women, then perhaps we can soften the space and allow them to grow, because we're not shaming them, we're not blaming. You've lived a human life and you've got wounds there, but only you can correct them. Only you can help yourself, and only you can do the work to allow yourself to have better, more meaningful relationships with your friends, your parents, your partner, your kids. All of that, it all benefits. And then for the women, I think for me, it's a case of understanding that, we've kind of said it, but this space that men are, we're in pain and we do bad things, but we have hearts. We just have become disconnected to them. And what we need to do is learn to reconnect to our hearts, but shaming us and making us wrong or telling us we are bad doesn't help us, because inside of us, we're like, I'm not bad. You just made me do this. Or like then we'd have every excuse under the book, but it's not that we're bad, because we know in our hearts, deep down, everyone, it's like every mother sees their young boy and knows that there's pureness, there's love to them, but we just got lost somehow. And the ego is so good at justifying and blaming and making others wrong. But yeah, if we can just have a little bit of compassion for understanding the journey that men go on and the path that we're taken on, and that we didn't choose to be bad.
No.
We didn't want to be bad, but stuff happened to us along the way.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Ben. So moving on to our quicker love, sex, magic questions. What is something that you love right now?
I love my heart, Mel. I love my heart. I love the connection that I found with my heart. It's my truth. It's the beautiful part of me. It's what I aim to connect with always. And I'm so grateful that I found it.
What a beautiful answer. And what is something that turns you on?
I'm going to say innocence, playful innocence. Something that lets me step into my masculinity step into my masculine and take control and lead, and with a softness and a playful adventure. That turns me on.
Beautiful. And when was the last time you experienced magic?
There's magic everywhere, Mel. There's magic everywhere. I want to share something that has changed my outlook in the last 2 weeks, because it's been tough over here, for the last couple of months, and I live alone, and I've been through a breakup, and it's been challenging. There's been all sorts of different things going on in my life. And something that's really shifted for me is just changing the language in my head that for a long time, or for the last few weeks, that said, I need to do this, I've got to do that, I should do this, you must do that, to just changing it every day, to say, instead of whenever that language came out, to just change it to, I get to work out today, I get to follow my passion today, I get to sit in this space with Mel today, I get to work on things that I love today, I get to cook healthy food today. When there was a period where I was like, oh God, I've got to do this work, I need to work out later, I've got to do that, I've got to cook, what am I going to do for lunch? And it's just it's like, for me, that is practicing gratitude all the time in everything I do. And when we show up in that energy, that's magic. When we show up with, I get to do this right now, I get to sit in this conversation with Mel and to see you and to exchange an energy and to hear you and to share and express and to just sit in this beautiful space. Like when I get to do that, I show up with that energy. when I must do it, it's like, right, okay, what are we going to do here? Like, how long have we got? When are we going to do it? You know, which of course, you know, I never brought that energy to this, but I did bring it to some of my things. So that for me is some real magic that I've reconnected with in the moment, just changing that language and seeing what we get to do in our life every day.
I love it. I love it. So Ben, where can everyone come and hang out in your space, be a part of your community and programs and get more from you?
Oh, thanks, Mel. It's Instagram, really. It's The Naked Professor. And then my website is benbidwell.com. I'm just launching a mentorship program that's taking people on this journey. And it's not just men, you know, it's not just men, but it's men and women. A journey to connect back into their heart and to become all of who they can be, which is the journey that I went on. And a journey that I feel people need. So that's kind of my real passion right now, along with Heart Space, which is a community that I'm building that allows people to be all of who they can be, to express how they really feeling, to go on a personal development journey of reconnecting to their truth and expressing that in a safe community. So they're my things really right now. And yeah, I'm just lucky, Mel. I'm just really lucky. I'm lucky to sit in the space. I'm lucky to be doing the work I'm doing. I'm lucky to connect with you. I'm so grateful to Hay House that they got on that stage. And,
we're all very, very lucky. And thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, all of your heart, all of your magic. I've really appreciated this conversation.
Thank you for giving me the space, Mel. It's lovely to connect with you.
All right, my loves. Well, I hope you got a lot from that episode and some things that you can take away into your relationships. As always, if you loved this episode, hit share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, and I'll see you on the next episode.